Well, we didn't have the normal top of the hour chimes today, but we're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the election board on April 15th to order. Regardless, do we need to call a roll today? It's a special meeting.
I think it's sufficient. You can say that all members are present in person. I would, however, acknowledge that Clerk Brown has a proxy.
Yes, we did receive a proxy from Clerk Brown, and serving in her stead today is Laura Wirt. So with that, we'll go ahead and get the meeting going. We really only have one item on the agenda today, and it relates to the commissioner's request that the election board have input on the proposed changes to the election workers' compensation. And so if you think about how we're doing this, there's essentially it's input from the board to the county commissioners regarding the compensation, but there's also two positions that are currently or historically were not included in the county salary ordinance that we're going to be adding as well. And that relates, I believe, to the couriers and counters. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Molly to kind of frame up the actual decision that's before us. So Molly?
So good afternoon, board members. The first item for consideration by the election board today is the proposed amendments to Chapter 287, which of the Monroe County Code, and I'm going to display that code for you. This was a code section that was adopted in 2014. And I will attempt to make it legible. Let's see. This chapter establishes limitations on the per diems, additional compensation, and meal allowances for election workers. On April 10th of this year, I presented to the commissioners suggested amendments to this code section pertaining to the addition of absentee couriers and counters. Because the code section, now I've made it too big, sorry. The code section didn't provide for a per diem for those two positions. These are two types of election workers in Monroe County, like I said, that didn't have a per diem, but the commissioners are statutorily responsible for setting that per diem. During the April 10th meeting, the election supervisor also expressed that it would be the desire of the clerk's office for the other election workers, and I'm going to scroll down in the code section, specifically the inspectors, the judges and clerks and sheriffs, to receive an increase in compensation. At the meeting, at the commissioners meeting, the justification that was offered was that multiple individuals who serve as election or as poll workers had contacted the clerk's office and expressed that without a raise, they would not be willing to work on the election day. And this was based, I think, on the fact that the absentee workers did receive a raise. So the commissioners are looking for an election board recommendation on how Chapter 287 should be amended. To aid the election board in this decision, I provided several documents for you on the bench. The first 2 pages are highlighted and they are labeled Primary 2023 and General 2023. These are it's the first page of the pay vouchers for the primary and general election. Luckily, on the first page, there was an inspector, a clerk, and a judge, and so I just highlighted them to show you the pay that was received in May and November of last year. I didn't provide you all 46 pages, but if you'd like them, I do have them available. The third document is a chart that reflects current compensation based off of the May 2023 primary compared to the proposed compensation. I can share that when you'd like on screen, but there is a minimal fiscal impact statement, and I say minimal because it's based on the minimal amount of judges and clerks that we would have at a poll, which is 2, that I don't think has historically happened. We usually have more. Also on the bench is job descriptions for each position as documented in the 2024 Election Administrator's Manual, and then finally a spreadsheet with comparison data for all 92 counties in Indiana as to what they pay their election workers. I would note that I did get that data off a third-party website. I spot checked several counties and they seemed accurate, but it might not reflect some most recent changes in 24, such as Hamilton County, which just amended their election worker pay on February 7th.
Okay. Well, do either of my colleagues on the board have any questions or comments that they'd like to share with the public and Molly and Kylie?
The clerk had given me some things, some points that she would like me to express.
Okay.
She had mentioned that she would like to convey in no certain terms that her advocacy for her increase in election day pay is as passionate as the advocacy she had in working to get the pay raise for absentee early voting workers. The ability to recruit and retain quality workers is not just a Monroe County problem, it is a problem throughout the Hoosier State and across the nation. What we're finding out is more and more people are like, I'd rather stay at home, I'd rather have the day off than to actually come out and assist with the elections, and it becomes a struggle. So it becomes more of an incentive for people to realize that it's a little better for them to, yes, we are helping with the elections, but yes, we also have some things that we can have covered with the money that they get. With the cost of living, everybody knows about the cost of living lately. The last couple of years has gone up, and this also helps with things that the election workers will be able to take care of on their own because of those raises of cost of living. So she reached out to Hamilton County because the cost of living in Monroe County is very similar, if not more than Hamilton County cost of living, and she wanted to bring that to attention. So I also had made up an election day workers comparison worksheet. So we have Monroe County per diem, the Monroe County, so the requested versus the current. I added in Brown County because it is a much smaller county, but it tends to have a little higher compensation. Hamilton County per diem, Monroe meals, Brown meals, Hamilton, etc. Training, requested versus current. If you would look at these comparisons, I think the one thing that stands out the most is that the inspectors in Hamilton County are paid a higher price, higher for the amount of precincts that they take on. So for example, if up to 6 precincts, for one inspector, they get 600. So that is something that I do believe Clerk Brown had made very abundantly clear that she would like to have a similar compensation for that because, for example, Brown County just has 1 precinct per inspector, and that's all that includes all the paperwork, all the stress, all the additional people that come around with different questions because every precinct has a different question. So she would really like to focus definitely on the inspectors and everybody else to a certain degree. So I don't know, she would like to have the maximum amount requested if into consideration. So.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Judith, do you have any thoughts, comments you want to share?
Well, I think it should be noted that there are considerable more registered voters in Hamilton County, which might play a part in how much they are paid up there. But we're being asked to support a $200 as opposed to what is in Hamilton County, for example, with the 1 precinct 300, correct? Or is that
I actually meant to adjust the Monroe per diem requested for the 6, the 4, the 3s to different amounts. Unfortunately, as we were talking earlier today, I didn't get those numbers in properly because I originally had it as the Monroe per diem current
Correct.
So, and yeah, the current was 165, but actually she was asking for 200 for 1 to 2 precincts, and then like additional 100 for another precinct, additional 100 for another precinct, additional 100. And unfortunately, I didn't put that on, I didn't correctly put that on here, so my apologies.
Is that a discussion that'll actually take place with the commissioners? Or
And I think that's what she's asking
them
the
to-
board
to approve what?
to approach the commissioners, to approach the council. I'm not exactly sure, again, I'm still new and trying to learn the whole process, but from what I understand is to actually have the conversation so the board can approach the commissioners, that can approach the council to make that call.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, for what it's worth, I'll jump in with some of my own thoughts. I mean, I looked at the county by county comparisons for all 92 counties, and it seemed like, you know, Monroe would not be the highest if these recommended rates are approved, but we would be, I think, in kind of the higher quartile. I mean, I didn't do a statistical deviation on it, but just visually looking at it, we wouldn't be the highest, but I think we would be in a chunk of counties that would be towards the high end. That in and of itself doesn't necessarily concern me, but the only thing that I am concerned about, and it's not going to affect how I vote on a recommendation, is, you know, making these kind of considerations after voting has already started. You know, just makes me feel a bit like we're being jammed. And it would have been a lot better, in my judgment, had we had this conversation and made these recommendations, you know, a month ago. But that's, you know, water under the bridge, so to speak. But having said that, I have no problem with the recommended rates. I think they're reasonable. Nothing's been changed in several years. And, you know, the bottom line, the fiscal impact of the proposed compensation compared to the current previous compensation is pretty de minimis in the scheme of things. I think the total amount is potentially $6,000, give or take. I mean, based on the minimum number of appointees, it would be about 5,800. Now, if we appoint more people, then of course that will, you know, go up. But with that, personally, I'm comfortable with the recommended new rates.
I do want to make 2 points before the board proceeds to a vote. I would point out that under the current policy, or the current code section, the positions are not being paid at the ceiling. They're all set under what is allowable. So, for example, the inspectors could make up to $165 for day of, with $52 for training, and meals could be provided at a rate up to $40. And if you add all those up, potentially with no changes to this amendment, or to this code section, inspectors could get $267 for election services. And then the second point I'd like to just make the board aware of, if there is consideration for the thought that if an individual is an inspector over multiple polls, I would note that a few election board meetings ago, the list of polls were approved. There were 29 polls, and only 5 of those polls have an inspector over one precinct. I didn't have a chance to look at the rest of them, but I can display the poll list if that helps to show the number of polls that each inspector has. I'll try to display. I don't know what happened to the screen.
Sorry, just a
Go
quick,
ahead, Laura.
sorry, just a quick correction. We'll have 29 different poll places, but we'll have precincts, up to 6 precincts per poll location. I just want to make that clear. You were saying one inspector with one poll place, but they had multiple precincts at that poll place.
So, yes, there are
okay.
29 polls, and for example, the Academy of Science and Entrepreneurship has 3 precincts in that poll spot. The Bloomington High School South has 5. And so, of the listed polls, there are only 5 with 1 precinct.
Got it. But unlike Hamilton County, we don't distinguish in terms of the rates
Currently,
based
we
on
do
the
not.
number of precincts. Correct.
And also just to point out that this ordinance was in 2014. That was 10 years ago.
Yep.
And a lot of things have changed.
So with this recommendation, are we doing that in the form of a resolution or just a ad hoc recommendation?
Can I have a moment?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, I didn't prepare a resolution. I can real quick. What our election supervisor was just providing me was the second item on the agenda is an appointment of election workers. And so to give you an idea of how many election workers we currently have, which I think this is not the final list, the list is still growing. There are 204 election workers with 29 inspectors, and then 2 judges at every poll. So
Okay. So why, if you want to work up a short resolution, Molly, while we're doing that, I know there's some people online. We'll give, if there's anyone connected virtually that would like to comment on the discussion, please raise your hand and we'll open up your line. I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Request pay increases. Okay. Okay. Well, I guess maybe we have to figure out which. So because, yeah.
there's a little bit of discussion here about what's actually being proposed. What we received in advance of the meeting did not include a variance on the inspector's compensation based on the number of precincts. You know, again, I guess in all candor, I'm just not as comfortable with that. Without a whole lot more data. I mean, what is the breakdown of, you know, our polling places by, you know, range of precincts? I mean, I recognize that, you know, we're dealing with a compensation model that's 10 years old, but we're, you know, on the fly being asked to adopt a system that would max, or I guess, mimic and max the highest compensated county in the state, which demographically is substantially different than Monroe County in terms of scale and wealth. So I'm just not comfortable doing that variance based on the number of precincts per inspector, and I prefer to stick with what was proposed, or at least what was shared in advance of the meeting, which is still, I think, you know, a fairly substantial change in the compensation that would at least, I think, meet some of the concerns that the clerk and the individual election workers have expressed to the board prior to today.
I agree with that.
May I also say that for the requested $200 inspector, it's only a $35 increase for the day.
Yeah.
It's not a per hour, it's
Right.
a per diem. We also have the election supervisor. Kylie, would you like to come up and add anything, any insight?
I just know right now we have multiple inspectors and judges who are already said that they would work for us, that have already let us know that if things are not changed after the meeting, and if we don't come to an agreement and the commissioners don't agree also, that they will not be working. We've been told to start looking for some replacements, so it's coming close to the election, and that's one less thing that we want to have to worry about, is whether or not our returning poll workers who have worked for years are going to come back. And it's just one of those things where you're already got these individuals here. They've been working for you for years. They know the process. They know how it's going to go, but they're frustrated because early voting is making more than what they're going to be making on election day. And we've also had conversations with them about, because most of them do work early voting. So they work early voting and then they do work election day. And they don't think it's right that they're going to be working the 6 hours during the day and then go and work 14 plus hours, because they work the 12 hours plus Saturday for pickup, the day before for setup, and then after the polls close, getting everything collected, bringing it back to Election Central, getting everything turned in. Just the process in general for them, they say at that point it's not worth it to them to come and work for such a low pay. In my opinion, raising it to the $200 is great, and then we can come back to the precincts, the increase per precinct at a later time when we don't have an election, like in 25, when we have time to think about it and actually have a discussion about it. I understand the reason that Clerk Nicole had brought it forward, because it is important. There are other counties that are doing it this way. There are some that are smaller than us, some that are bigger than us. I just think having more time to research it, and during 25, that would be a great time to do that. But getting up to this 200 for inspectors and the pay raise for everybody else, I think would be great.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Also, can I tell you guys how many voters we have in early voting so far? So total, we have 557, and that is out of the 91,257 registered voters in Monroe County.
Okay. Okay, so do we need a motion then to recommend that we would express the will of the board to the commissioners that we support the proposed increases.
I would like to make that motion. Do I have to go through that whole statement?
Oh, it looks like Molly has a resolution for us.
So the resolution talks about the first, whereas it indicates that the commissioners are in charge of appointing the absentee couriers and counters. The second talks about how they appoint the precinct election officers, which is inspector, judge, clerk. Third whereas is they adopted Chapter 287. Fourth whereas is that they requested input from the election board on amendments to the chapter. And then you get down to the now therefores, which include the amendments. So the first amendment is to Chapter 287, Section A1, to increase the inspectors not to exceed 200, the judges not to exceed 175, clerks and student workers not to exceed 150. And as a reminder, if there are any student workers, that has to be approved unanimously independently by the election board. I did not adjust the sheriff amount because the proposed amount by the clerk's office was 120, and it's currently set at 125, so the proposed amount is within the current range.
Okay.
And then I did not adjust any of the training amounts because the inspector and judge training amount is currently set at not to exceed 52. The proposal is $50. The clerk is not to exceed $31, and the proposed amount is $30. I guess I need to adjust the sheriff. So I'm quickly adding a second section, so section A2, which will adjust the training pay for sheriffs because it's currently set at not to exceed $20.50, and the recommended amount is not to exceed $30. And then the third statement is to add section D, which accounts for absentee couriers and absentee counters and couriers. The proposed amount is $175 for counters. Currently in the salary ordinance, it's set at $135, and couriers is not provided for at all in the salary ordinance, so there's no reference point for me to give you on that one. And then there is not currently a training amount recommended.
So do we need to just delete the training line then, so it doesn't confuse people?
I do want to make a statement though. So counters. If it would be okay with you guys to make a change to that, the language of it, that language is outdated as we don't hand count anymore. Our office suggests that they are more of sorters on election day. They're the ones that go through the process of opening the ballots and taking them out of the envelopes, getting them ready to go back to our scanners. So that would be a conversation that would also could take place. I know that many are questioning why they are called counters when that's not what they do anymore, and they don't like that that's the terminology used for them. And we even have workers who come in and are like, no, I'm not going to be a counter. I don't want to be liable for that. And then we explain to them what it is, and they're like, oh, okay.
I would recommend not changing the name, as absentee ballot counters is what's statutorily provided, and I think once you start changing names, we end up in this mess again where we're trying to figure out which one's which and who's getting paid what.
Right. Okay, so if you scroll back to the top then, to summarize what we're recommending then to the commissioners is that for inspectors, the compensation would not exceed 200. That compares to today of 165. For judges, not to exceed 175, which compares to 135 today. And then for clerks, we're recommending 150, which compares to 135 today. And then we're also adding a training line for sheriffs, because we currently do not include them at all, with the training amount not to exceed $30. And then we're also adding the absentee counter at 175 and the absentee courier at 150. So Laura, does your motion to approve this still stand?
Yes. I would suggest that we put April of 2024.
Oh,
as
slight
good call.
motorcycle. Yeah, thank you.
And I would second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Again, I'll give people online an opportunity to have input by raising your hand. I don't believe there are any takers. So with that, let's call the roll.
Board Member Bankart,
Yes.
Board Member Fernandez,
Yes.
Proxy, Ms. Ward? Is
Ward.
that-
Yes.
Okay, so the resolution passes. I think we need to do one last bit of business today regarding the list of,
Well, and before we leave this, procedurally what will happen now is I'll take this resolution back to the commissioners. They will consider the amendments to the code, and then it will come back to the election board to set the specific amount, which, based on our conversation today, I think you're just going to end up setting it at the ceiling for now.
great. Okay, so the next item is that we have received certified list of poll workers from the Monroe County Democratic Chair, as well as from the Monroe County Republican Party Chair. I believe we have to formally receive these, is that correct?
Correct. In accordance with IC Code 36611, the county chairman makes the nominations, and then the county election board shall appoint as any individual nominated who is eligible to serve under this chapter, and there's a whole list of things they have to meet. And then I did prepare quickly a resolution for this one as well, and it will say that pursuant to 36611, the individuals listed in Exhibit A and Exhibit B are duly appointed as election officers for the primary election occurring in May of 2024, contingent on their acceptance of an administered oath, because they do get an oath.
Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the resolution certifying the poll workers for the 2024 primary?
I will make the motion.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. I'll make one more call for anybody that's online that might want to comment. Seeing none, I will call for the vote.
Board Member Bankart,
Yes.
Board Member Fernandez,
Yes.
Proxy, I'm never going to say it.
Wirt.
Wirt.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, and that concludes our business of the special session of the, or special meeting of the Monroe County Election Board for today, April 15, 2024. So with that, I believe we are adjourned.